Well, I'm kind of embarrassed because lately everywhere I go in the airports and other places, people pull me aside and they ask about this 3 cups of tea thing. And I'm really embarrassed because I only wrote you a $100 check. I didn't quite have the guts to say, Tom, you can still write another check and we'll stick to the next book. Sorry, Tom, but the next book's already done. And that's an insult to that. My daughter and I were doing homework the other night, and she was kind of distracted. And she looked up at me and she said, Daddy, I figured out that in 1993, you spent $128 on postage and you only raised $100. Anyways, I kept working to get the school built and raising money. Finally, we got the money raised and we got started the first school. From that program, we have a program now called Pennies for Peace. And it started out with some kids in an elementary school in Wisconsin. I'd only raised about $2,400. In 1994, I went to visit a school where my mother was a principal. When I got done, a 4th grader named Jeffrey came up to me. He said, I have a piggy bank at home and I'm going to help you. I didn't think anything of it. What can a 4th grader do? Right, Kuiper? My son's in 4th grade. Anyways, but 6 weeks later, Westside School had raised 62,340 pennies. And when you think about it, it wasn't adults, it wasn't even celebrities, it was children reaching out to children halfway around the world, and they did it with pennies. So today we have a program called Pennies for Peace, and for lack of better words, it's kind of going bananas lately. When I visit business schools, they ask me, what's your strategic or marketing plan? We don't have any marketing plan, sorry. But what we do is we empower kids to do things on their own. And Pennies for Peace last year was in 278 schools, and thanks now to also the junior version, the Young Leaders version, Pennies for Peace is in 4,500 schools just 1 year later. And we not only encourage kids about philanthropy, but to do things on their own. So I'm going to show you just a couple examples of what young children have done now with Pennies for Peace. So this young man, what's his name, Kuiper? Zach Bonner. Zach is from Tampa, Florida. He's 11 years old. He did Pennies for Peace for a couple of years, but he's also bothered by the homeless kids in the Tampa area. So he started a program called the Little Red Wagon Foundation. This year, Zach walked from Tampa, Florida to Washington, D.C., and he raised $74,000 for homeless kids in the U.S. Zach plans, if you tune into Little Red Wagon Foundation, he's going to walk from Tampa to LA. He's going to raise $1 million to bring awareness to homeless kids in the U.S. And when Zach set up his nonprofit a couple years ago, he called me up and asked me about what's a board director? Like a board person, or, and I said, no, it's like a moral compass and fiduciary responsibility. And Zach said, could I put some kids on my board? And I said, I don't think there's any law against in Florida. So today, all of Zach's board directors have to be under 18 years of age. Dodson, 16 years old. She's from Colorado. She's an orphan. She came from Peru when she was very young. She now is running a foundation called Peruvian Hearts, along with just high school classmates. And they're running an orphanage for 120 young women and boys in Peru. This is Garrett Weiss and his brother Kyle. They had done Pennies for Peace for a few years. They also, when they visited Johannesburg, South Africa, they were disturbed because they saw kids living in cardboard boxes, but what bothered them is the kids had nowhere to play. So they started a foundation called fundafield.org, and last year they raised $58,000 and got 5 soccer fields set up in the ghettos of Johannesburg. This year they plan to set up, or next year, a dozen soccer fields. So back to 95, I went back to Pakistan, I had the school supplies. When I got to the village, Haji Ali again met me, Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. And then again he shook his head and he said, Cheezalay. What the heck? Because there's no phone there's no fax, there's no post office. Not only did I come back, but I had brought the school supplies. And he said, if you really want to build a school first, we're going to have to build a bridge. So I hadn't thought of that. So I had to come back to the States, raised $10,000 more in 1995 to build a 284-foot span bridge over the Brawley River. Well, September 13th, 95, I was 38 years old. I was a bachelor. We have all the key characters here tonight. Anyways, I was a nurse, working as trauma nurse. I was a neurophysiology student studying epilepsy. I was at a fundraising dinner. It was getting rather late, so I walked to the back. There was a very beautiful woman in the back. She had on a dress and she was wearing black combat boots. Anyways, I started talking to her, and her name was Tara Bishop, and 6 days later we got married. So now we're going to get back to She said, have you ever heard of cut and paste?